Russian President Vladimir Putin stated that he is ready to meet with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky not only in Moscow, but also in a third country, and also declared that the war is nearing its end. He made this statement during a press conference following the military parade in Moscow. According to Putin, he is ready to meet with Zelensky, but only for the purpose of signing an agreement. He added that the United States is genuinely striving for a resolution, but that this is, above all, a matter between Ukraine and Russia. Putin also accused Kyiv of allegedly not sending any proposals to Moscow regarding a prisoner exchange. Russia had already sent Ukraine a proposal for a prisoner exchange even before Trump's suggestion. No proposals regarding an exchange have been received from Kyiv so far, said the Russian president. The head of the Kremlin stated that Russia had given Ukraine a list of Ukrainian soldiers who are currently in captivity. Russia provided Ukraine with a list of 500 Ukrainian soldiers in captivity, but then Kyiv dropped off the radar, the Russian president added. Putin stated that military equipment was not present at the parade in Moscow, supposedly because this year is not an anniversary of the end of the Great Patriotic War. He also added that Russian troops need to focus their attention on the so-called special military operation, that is, the war against Ukraine. Putin believes that the Russian-Ukrainian war is allegedly nearing its end. I think that the situation with the Ukrainian conflict is coming to an end, said the head of the Russian Federation. Putin also once again came up with a new reason for starting the war against Ukraine. The events in Ukraine began after Kyiv attempted to associate with the EU, stated the head of the Kremlin, although previously they had claimed there that they had nothing against Ukraine joining the EU. In addition, the head of the Russian Federation stated that the strikes on the center of Kyiv were allegedly intended as retaliatory actions to provocations. Earlier, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky stated that trilateral negotiations with Russia have been postponed for now. However, he emphasized that he is ready to meet with Putin, but not in Moscow or Kyiv. He noted that possible locations for the meeting could be countries in the Middle East, Europe, or the United States. At the same time, political analyst Lucas Scott stated in an interview with Channel 24 that despite Putin's claims about the imminent end of the war, in reality the conflict will last much longer, since the Kremlin is not planning to make any compromises. In his opinion, the media hype caused by Putin's statement about an allegedly imminent peace does not reflect the true meaning of what was said. Scott emphasized that the Russian president did not explicitly speak about a victory achieved or an agreement on a final ceasefire. The phrase about ending the war was mentioned at the end of a 45-minute speech and was not a key part of the address. Many Russians are already tired of the invasion and want it all to be over. Therefore, it is logical that Putin says everything will end, the professor notes. In the analyst's opinion, the words of the Russian president do not at all mean that the Kremlin is truly ready for a compromise. It is likely that Putin meant that the Americans would put pressure on Ukraine and force it to capitulate. And this is interesting because we are at a point where negotiations between Ukraine, Russia, and the United States have reached a deadlock. But for some reason, the Russian side claims that it will be able to get Washington to pressure Kyiv on its own terms. This is a much more important conclusion because it shows how the Russians behave, the expert says. Summing up, the professor of political science expressed the conviction that the war in Ukraine will not end in the near future. In his opinion, Putin will continue to try to seize Ukraine. It is worth noting that during the last phone conversation, according to journalists, Putin told Trump that there should be no expectation of a peace agreement with Ukraine this year. Russian generals convinced the dictator that by winter, Russia would fully occupy the Donbass. Meanwhile, American analysts predict that the war in Ukraine will end according to the Finnish scenario. That is, the country will lose part of its territory and will be forced to declare military neutrality, but will retain its internal sovereignty and economic ties with the West. That's all for now.